Chapter 1. The Hook. The year is 1996. A woman steps into a cramped workshop inside a converted Victorian hospital in Hackney, East London. The hallway smells of old stone and fresh leather. Scraps of silk and calfskin are piled on every surface like treasure that hasn't been sorted yet. And behind a workbench so worn it might have come with the building sits a quiet Malaysian man moving a needle through leather with the focus of someone who has been doing exactly this since he was 11 years old. That man is Jimmy Chu. In the years that follow this meeting, his name will become one of the most recognizable luxury brands on earth, worn by Princess Diana, referenced in a Kanye West song, the centerpiece of a scene in Sex and the City so powerful that an entire generation of women will absorb Jimmy Choo as shorthand for a certain kind of aspiration: beautiful, expensive, slightly dangerous. The brand that starts in this hospital workshop will eventually sell for $1.35 billion. But here is the part that nobody leads with. The man whose name is on every single shoebox. The craftsman who built this with his own hands, who stitched leather in Hackney when nobody was watching, who earned the trust of the Princess of Wales one handmade pair at a time, will not be the one who keeps the company. He will sell his stake. He will watch his name become a holding company asset. He will spend years as a footnote in the story of his own brand. And yet, that is not the end of his story. Not even close. Chapter 2. The Boy from Penang. Georgetown, Penang, Malaysia, the 1950s. Jimmy Chu Yang Kit is born on November 15, 1948, the second of 11 children. His father runs a shoe shop from the front room of the family home. Not artisan in the romanticized way that word gets used now. This is work. The work that feeds 11 mouths. Every morning, his father opens the shutters, sits at his workbench, and begins. Every afternoon after school, the young Jimmy comes home not to play, not to rest, but to watch. He positions himself at the edge of his father's workbench and observes everything. How a piece of leather is held up to the light to check for flaws. How a wooden form gives the shoe its structure. How stitches are placed and tensioned so the finished shoe holds its shape for years. His father doesn't narrate any of this. He just works. Jimmy watches. When I first started, my father wouldn't let me make a shoe, Jimmy would recall decades later. Instead, he said, sit and watch. Sit and watch for months and months. I did that. There's a whole philosophy of education in that instruction. You don't start by doing, you start by seeing, really seeing, until what you're observing begins to live in your hands without you having to think about it. By the time Jimmy Chu is 11 years old, he has made his first complete pair of shoes. Not practice pieces, not an exercise, real leather slippers, hand-stitched, cut and shaped to fit his mother's feet. His father looks at the work, doesn't say much, but the nod that follows is worth more than any formal assessment. Then comes the part the industry profiles tend to gloss over. Penang in the late 1950s cannot hold Jimmy Chu's ambition indefinitely. The family's financial pressure is real and constant. Jimmy drops out before finishing primary school, not because he's incapable, but because the circumstances of his life simply don't allow for the conventional path. Think about that for a second. The man who will eventually receive an OBE from the Queen, open his own fashion academy in Mayfair, and have a prestigious scholarship at the London College of Fashion named after him, never finished primary school. He wasn't climbing with a lighter pack, he was climbing without shoes, which, given what he would go on to build, is either ironic or poetic, depending on your mood. Chapter 3. Hackney. In the early 1980s, Jimmy Chu arrives in London. His English is limited. His savings are thin. The city receives him the way London has always received ambitious young immigrants, with complete indifference. He enrolls at Cordwainers Technical College in 1980, one of the most prestigious shoemaking schools in the world. The name comes from the medieval guild of cordwainers, craftsmen who worked with new leather to create shoes from scratch, not cobblers who repaired existing footwear, people who made things that had never existed before. That distinction was ancient, and it mattered to him in a way that was almost personal. He graduates in 1983, and then, instead of looking for a job like any sensible recent graduate, he does something that takes either tremendous confidence or tremendous stubbornness, probably both. He opens his own shop. In 1986, he finds space inside the Metropolitan Free Hospital in Hackney, a Victorian institution converted into studios for artists and craftspeople. Not glamorous. 4 walls, high ceilings, cold floors, and enough room for a workbench. He rents it, sets up his tools, opens for business. Entirely bespoke from day one. Custom shoes made entirely by hand, fitted personally to each client. No ready-to-wear component, no off-the-shelf product. Nothing that could be replicated without Jimmy Choo sitting down with you and learning the shape of your foot. This was the opposite of scale. He knew it. He didn't care. Word spreads the way it always spreads, through networks of discerning people, quietly, persistently, one conversation at a time. Then, in 1988, Vogue magazine runs an 8-page spread featuring his work. 8 pages in British Vogue. For a one-man operation in a disused hospital in East London. This was not an opportunity, it was a seismic event, and somewhere in the early 1990s, a woman named Diana, the Princess of Wales, the most photographed person on the planet, starts paying attention to his shoes. Chapter 4. The Princess. Princess Diana wears Jimmy Choo to public engagements, pale blue satin slingbacks, two-tone heels in green and navy, practical elegance for days when the cameras would find her and she needed to be quietly, completely right. Jimmy Choo visits Kensington Palace to discuss designs. He sits with the princess and talks through her schedule, a state visit here, a hospital opening there, an international trip where the photographs will be studied by 1 billion people. She was, he has consistently said, unlike any expectation, extraordinarily down to earth. She never complained about fit, which from someone who wore shoes in front of the world's cameras for hours at a time, said everything about the quality of the work. She sent him handwritten thank you notes after his visits to the palace. Princess Diana wasn't like other royals, he has recalled. She'd try and carry my things for me. That image, the Princess of Wales reaching for a shoemaker's bag, tells you everything about why the relationship between them worked. In the summer of 1997, Diana places her final order with Jimmy Choo. Flat pumps in V-cut Italian silk fail, the fabric sourced from Joel & Sons, the Queen's own fabric supplier, ordered in especially for the commission. Jimmy Choo finishes the shoes. They are waiting. Diana dies in Paris on August 31, 1997. The shoes are never collected. That pair has stayed with Jimmy Choo for nearly 30 years. He speaks about it in interviews with a quiet directness that doesn't reach for meaning. He simply states the fact and leaves the listener to feel its weight, the last thing she never received. Chapter 5. The Deal. Even as all of this is unfolding, something else is already in motion, and it will prove, in its own way, to be a different kind of loss. The woman who walked into Jimmy Choo's workshop in 1996 was Tamara Mellon. She was 27, an accessories editor at British Vogue, and her proposition was commercially sound. Jimmy Choo was producing extraordinary work, but the bespoke model was fundamentally unscalable. Every pair required his personal time, his personal presence, his personal attention. There was no way to grow it without multiplying him, which was obviously impossible. What she proposed was a ready-to-wear line, manufactured in Italian factories, sold in retail boutiques at the upper end of the accessible luxury market. Her father provided the initial capital. The first boutique opens in May 1996 on Morecambe Street in Belgravia. The shoes sell. They sell extremely well. But underneath the acceleration, something is becoming clear that perhaps hadn't been fully examined at the outset. This was Tamara Mellon's machine. The creative direction, the retail strategy, the investor relationships, the brand positioning, these were her domain. Jimmy Choo, the craftsman, was not built for this world. The boardroom was not his workbench. The investor presentations were not his vocabulary. By 2001, 5 years into the partnership, something breaks. In November 2001, Jimmy Choo sells his 50% stake. The reported figure, $30 million. By any ordinary measure, a life-changing sum for a man who arrived in London with almost nothing. But here is what he was actually selling. He was not selling a shareholding in an abstract financial vehicle. He was selling his name. The word Jimmy Choo, the exact name his parents gave him, now belonged to other people. The brand continued. Phoenix Equity Partners came in, then Lion Capital, then Towerbrook. In 2011, Labelux purchased the company for approximately £500 million. In 2017, Michael Kors Holdings completed its acquisition for $1.35 billion. The company, now Capri Holdings, today generates revenues approaching $600 million annually from the Jimmy Choo brand alone. He was 53 years old when he sold. He no longer owned himself in that particular way. Chapter 6. What he kept. Here is the question that business journalism never quite asks, because business journalism follows the money. What happens to a craftsman when the company bearing his name moves on without him? It turns out he keeps working. After the sale, Jimmy Choo returns to what he has always done: bespoke couture work. Handmade shoes, fitted personally to clients who come to him specifically because they want something a factory cannot produce. In 2002, the year after the sale, Queen Elizabeth II awards him an OBE for services to the fashion industry. The timing is worth noting. He had just divested from the commercial empire bearing his name, and the British state chose that moment to formally recognize what he had contributed. The honor was not for the transaction, it was for the craft. Then, in 2021, Jimmy Choo opens the JCA London Fashion Academy in Mayfair, his own school, a place for young designers with a particular focus on the handmade, on the kind of knowledge that cannot be learned from a screen, but only from a teacher who has the skill living in their hands. He opens a Hounslow outpost specifically to reach emerging talent who might not have access to what Mayfair represents. In 2023, a prestigious scholarship at the London College of Fashion, the institution that now encompasses Cordwainers, the school that formed him, is named the Cordwainers x Jimmy Choo M.A. Award. He had gone from student who barely spoke the language to the person the institution names its scholarship after. If you've learned a craft from your parents and mentors, it would be a waste not to pass it on, he said in 2024. At 77, he is still at the workbench. Chapter 7. The Legacy. Consider what this story actually contains. A boy in Penang in the 1950s learns a craft by watching in silence for months. He drops out of school. He crosses the world with almost nothing. He builds something extraordinary in an East London workshop that nobody visits on purpose. He earns the trust of the most photographed woman in the world, one handmade pair at a time. He co-founds a brand that sells for $1.35 billion, and then he keeps going. He keeps making shoes. He keeps teaching. He opens a school. He returns to the institution that gave him the chance he needed, and he gives it back. In an industry that forgets its own history with remarkable efficiency, Jimmy Choo is something genuinely rare, a reminder that the thing underneath the brand, the actual craft, the actual skill, the actual human knowledge carried in the hands of a specific person, is the irreplaceable thing. The brand can be sold, the name can be trademarked, the boutiques can be opened and closed and refitted. But the knowledge of how to make a perfect shoe? That cannot be acquired at any price. Somewhere, there is still a pair of unfinished shoes in Italian silk faille, cut and stitched for a woman who never came to collect them. He finished them anyway, because that is what you do when the work matters to you. You finish it. If that's the kind of story you want more of, subscribe to Boardroom Files.